This video may be offensive to those with good taste and common decency. It's meant to entertain while it educates. Enjoy. It's been hot lately, and if you lay out in the sun for more than a few minutes, you're going to want to grab a garden hose and spray yourself down. Well, if you're that hot, imagine how the birds feel. Here's some things you can do to help birds get through the hot weather. All right, so today we're going to talk about some practical ways you can help your backyard birds out when the weather gets hot. The water becomes even more important during these times of years because the natural sources may have dried up and be harder to find. Another thing, at the end of the video, we're going to discuss some things you can do regarding your bird's food.
It's not even hot where I live. Do I need to watch this video?
Well, thank you for the question, kind lady. Today's advice is going to be useful for most areas and most climates, and if it's not hot in your area right now, keep it in mind for when the weather does start to climb. If all else fails, you can change the channel to something else and maybe see what the Kardashians are up to these days. They're pretty interesting. All right, so all birds need water to survive, and so I recommend keeping a water dish or bird bath out all year long for your birds to use. It's a great way to keep birds coming to your yard, and you might even see some new ones that wouldn't normally come to a feeder, but they will come to a watering dish or bird bath. You might be tempted to find a large, nice, deep dish, can hold a lot of water and allow birds to dive and submerge into the water. But most backyard birds actually prefer water about 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep. That's where they feel the most comfortable. Most of your backyard birds are just going to squat down in shallow water and kind of just splash water up onto themselves and basically look like dorks as they clean themselves. The exception, of course, would be water birds, but you're not going to get those typically in your backyard anyway.
Now, my grandson bought me a beautiful deep glass bird bath for my birthday. Are you saying he bought me a crappy gift? I ought to come over there and slap you upside your head.
Oh, okay, now calm down there, Grandma. Your grandson meant well, but this is actually a common problem with manufacturers. The deeper bird baths look better to consumers, so that's what they buy because they think the birds want nice deep water. It's kind of a vicious cycle. The birds will use a deep bird bath, mostly for drinking though. If you want them to bathe, it needs to be a little more shallow, or you can add rocks to a deeper bath. Unfortunately, that also makes it harder to clean. The ideal bird bath is going to be less than 2 inches deep and have a rough surface so the birds can get a grip and not slide around on it. That way they'll bathe and drink out of it, and you'll get the most enjoyment.
So we're not supposed to use a bath that's too smooth or too deep? What's a brother supposed to use?
Oh my goodness, I am loving the diversity of questions we're getting today. To answer your question, the best baths are made of either cement, rock, maybe textured plastic. It can be almost anything. Just glass and like smooth ceramic tend to not be as good because they just birds can't get grip on it, and a lot of them tend to be too deep, but not all of them.
Well, why can't I just put less water in it to keep it shallow? Why do you have to make it so confounded difficult?
Yes, you can just put less water in it, and that works in some areas. In my area, however, we get a lot of rain, and so we're constantly battling the rain. It's always trying to overfill our bird baths. So for us, it's just easier to get a shallow one to begin with, and then it's not an issue. What about the mosquitoes? Should I add something to the water to keep the mosquitoes away? Well, that's another great question we get asked a lot. And I would say no, do not add any chemicals to the water, but you can add something like a solar bubbler or a product we call water wiggler that just kind of spins inside the water, keeps it moving. So birds are attracted to the sound of water and movement of water. So if they see it moving or they can hear it, they're more likely to come check it out. And moving water also helps eliminate the mosquitoes because they can't lay eggs in there and get little mosquito larvae swimming around. So that's the best way to handle that. You might also consider a fountain or bubbler. Those range quite a bit in price, from a little solar one that you can add to an existing bird bath to a super fancy electric pump, recycles the water. Two things to remember: there are going to be a lot more maintenance, especially if you have trees around. You got to constantly clean that pump out, or else it just doesn't pump anymore. And you also want to make sure you have some kind of a flat, shallow area in it where the birds can comfortably bathe. And speaking of maintenance, you're going to want to clean your bird bath on a regular basis as well, especially if you have trees around or you have messy birds. Typically, we just take a garden hose, dump out what's in there, rinse it out, refill. You might need to take a stiff brush and brush it out. And if it's really bad, you can use a 10% bleach solution, but you're going to want to rinse it out real well when you're done, let it completely dry, then fill it with water. Pardon me, old chap, but what location and height shouldst I place my bird baths? Well, you should place them, first of all, in an area where you can see them best and enjoy them the most. Our ground bird bath seems to get used the most out of all of them, followed by our bubbler that's on a raised porch. But all of them, at all the different heights, get some use. And you will also want to be careful where you put them if you have pets around. Dogs will drink out of the short ones and possibly knock over the tall ones, so keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but what do we do about freezing temperatures?
Well, that's a topic we're going to want to tackle in a future video, but the short answer is just keep it in mind when you're buying a bird bath. If it's made out of glass, concrete, even some stone ones can break when the water freezes. So you can handle that by adding a de-icer that just keeps the water just above freezing, and that typically will solve your problem. Or you can just empty them out and put them away for the winter, but I don't recommend that.
Hey, I thought you were going to talk about some bird food in the summer too.
So in the summertime, there's not a lot of changes need to be made to your food, as long as you're feeding good quality sunflower is the main ingredient, and preferably out of the shell. Out of the shell because it makes less mess. You don't get the shells below. It can't grow if it falls to the ground. And also, finches will actually eat sunflower. They love it, but they typically have, the smaller ones anyway, have trouble cracking the shells. So if you feed a mix with sunflower out of the shell, they'll appreciate that. The main thing you're going to want to change, or two things I should say, is suet. In the summertime, when it gets over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you want to switch to no melt suet, or some call it suet dough. It's got typically cornmeal, I think, added, so the suet doesn't melt as easily. It can withstand much higher temperatures. And you also want to change your hummingbird nectar much more often on really hot days, over 80, 90. It needs to be changed out daily with fresh nectar. Just dump out whatever's in there, rinse out the feeder real good, and add more nectar. Once the temperatures get back to normal, I recommend going back to the regular suet again. It's more pure, and the birds actually prefer that over the no melt. All right, well, that's pretty much it for today's video. If you got any value out of this, please like and subscribe. It would do us a huge favor and help us keep bringing you content on how to attract more birds to your backyard.